everybody, the iLord Root here, and welcome back to another episode of Flight for Survival. So today, we're just going to prepare for the upcoming Duna launch. I guess I keep on pushing back the launch date, but that's partially because things end up popping up that we need to do. And because of that, I wanted to do a couple of things that may or may not be that important. One of the things I definitely wanted to point out first was that I actually figured out the parachute bug. It turned out being due to deadly re-entry. And although I don't think this probe can survive this sort of landing here, because it is going to be pretty heavy, and I have had trouble trying to land it in the past. You know, it turns out that what was happening was that we were running into this one issue where no matter what it was that we tried to do, and let's just get that periapsis down a little bit, we were just having trouble getting this thing down. So, or really without the parachutes burning up, that would be the big deal there. So, because I don't think it's going to survive, I'm actually going to go ahead and just tell it to re-enter. If it does, then great. Because as it turns out, this sort of design here is very difficult to pull off. There's 3.75 meter SSTO, and I tested it before, it worked okay, but it's not the best design I can think of. So let's get this guy down. I'll probably deorbit the other deal off screen, but I did want to prove to you that this can work, and so let's bring that apsis down to maybe 40, get ourselves a rather gentle re-entry here. And then see how close we get to KSC. Also, one thing that I need to do that I hadn't really done is I need to go ahead and point surface retrograde. That'll be important as well. Once all of this is taken care of, it shouldn't be too difficult to get everything going. Let's just get on down here to this point of vehicle return, and we will do what we can to salvage this vehicle. Now, because we do have fuel in this vehicle, we do have the option of assisted landing, which would be great, because I'm relatively certain that this thing could withstand it. It's just whether or not it will tear itself apart in the atmosphere that's going to be the big issue for us. So down we go. We're going to probably land quite short of the KSC at this point, but that won't matter as much. As long as we're able to get this thing down to where it needs to be, then it'll be fine. We are very slowly losing altitude here, which is really what we want, but I don't believe I've brought this thing down enough. So we'll just run the throttle a bit. And kill some of this fuel. We don't have much of it left anyhow. And we are beginning to get drag here, which is very nifty. Chances are, however, we will not land precisely where we want to. But it's close enough, and I think if we can keep this guy from flipping out, that's going to be the trick. Because it will snap itself apart when it dies. But yeah, let's just wait for this guy to get going and get on down. And I think we will end up in the ocean somewhere. It seems most likely to me. Either that or perhaps the desert. The desert seems like a good candidate too. So anyway, the way you can tweak this, and I did tweak it back a bit, is there's a parachute deployment multiplier in Deadly Reentry that you can set. And this is what you want to set whenever you end up, dealing with this. Because otherwise, like when you re-enter with Ferrum Aerospace, there's just not going to be enough drag. And normally the limit is like 350 meters per second before you can deploy your parachutes. I'm actually really surprised. That came through just great. So maybe that one can be reused. Because it does seem to work pretty well with a couple of minor tweaks. We are still going to hit the ground at a very hard pace, and that has to do with the fact that maybe there's not enough parachutes here. And there we go. That vessel is recovered. Let's talk about some of the other mods I installed, because I did install quite a many. I ended up trying to think of what I could add to make this a little bit more fun. You did see I had the Trajectory mod going here. But I also added the Procedural Parts mod, and I'm going to demonstrate that with this communication satellite that we've got here. This is intended for basically a Molinya orbit, hence the name Molly. And this should not be too hard for us to do. But as you can see, my fairing is messed up for some reason. Well, let me go back and fix that. That is not going to do. I guess you got a sneak peek of the inside. But the nice thing about this mod is that it lets you do custom-sized tanks for just about anything you can think of. And I've been going through and rebuilding my Titan SSTOs as a result. If we just go through here real quick, I'm going to grab this fairing, stick it back on, and then we will put it up here. And everything should be action grouped. Another thing I did that I wanted to point out is that I got tired of using the interstage ring for my service compartment because it has that decoupler on it. So I copied this part and took out the decoupler module on it, and that allows for me to have this very nice interior compartment with everything in it. Everything that I could possibly want, anyway. Let me just make sure that I have the action group set real quick, because that would be very annoying if I don't. There we go. That'll be perfect. Well, we will go ahead and launch this guy as well. So the entire idea behind this kind of orbit is that we're going to essentially plan to put this guy in a polar orbit, which means I must pay attention to what I'm doing foremost. But in addition to that, I must also do other things. Now, thrust to weight ratio is a little bit on the high side. That doesn't really matter as much because we're going polar. We just don't want to leave the atmosphere too early. These guys right here, I didn't change the parachute deployment distance, but that's going to be okay. And what we're basically trying to do is get this guy into a 90-degree inclination and give it a fairly high apoapsis. I reckon that's actually a little bit too slow on my turn. And I do have to be careful here because if I'm not careful, I will substantially overshoot. But, yeah. We will just get this guy at least into an orbit real quick. And we will see what we can do about it. It's not the best launch I've ever done by any means, but it'll do just fine. Now think, as long as we're decent here, we'll be just fine. We have more than enough Delta V to get this guy down, which is going to be quite nice for us, because we definitely do want this guy to be able to come down. Can we adjust our inclination some? The answer to that question is maybe. It'll really depend on a lot of things. Well, I'm going to call that good enough for now. And when we get up here, we will expand our orbit out a little bit to something kind of circular. We want a little bit of delta V left. And in fact, we can actually spare a bit. We just want to be out of the atmosphere for now. But while we're at it, we need to turn everything on. That'll be important. There's a number of things we have here, like we have this procedural battery here, and a procedural fuel tank that'll help us make our adjustments as well. This should leave us with about as much delta V as we want. And you can see this thing is actually pretty sprightly when it comes to its reaction wheels. So getting oriented is not going to be a problem. But we're about to get this burn taken care of here. We'll do any remaining inclination changes when we put this thing up into orbit. And we might as well go to one of these dishes here. And set the one target to Kerbin, and the other will set to, oh, I don't know, maybe Kami Mark II-1 would be good. Let's get these other guys set up as well. We'll make this one the active target, or the active vessel rather. This guy point towards Duna, so we have another Duna satellite here. And we'll have this one point towards Eve, if I can find it. And that pretty much does it here for our thingy. Now we have just got to get this thing into an appropriate orbit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this thing. It's got more than enough delta V left. And we will come down and set its height up to some appreciable amount if I can actually hit the maneuver nodes any. It doesn't look like it. Well, one thing we can do then in the interim is we can go to this guy right here. If I can get it to go. If I can get it to select, that would be nice. It appears not. Well, that's lovely, isn't it? I guess we'll have to do this the hard way. But this is basically meant for our long-range communications. And that big communications dish in the center is going to be where all the magic happens. That will be the place where whenever we end up being unable to hit anything else, this guy will come in. So I'm going to take the dish over the moon dish, and I'm going to have it target the Molly one. And there's even more room for expansion where that came from. But let's go to Molly Mark 1. Let's switch to it. And I'm going to try to get this thing as close to as centered above the poles as I can. Height will be probably somewhere around 5 or so million meters. That seems about right. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to make this to where whatever it is that we do, this guy is going to be hovering above the planet most of the time. Now, will it work? I don't know. It is my hope that it will. But you never can really tell with these things. So down to that burn point. We may make one more pass. Because we want this thing to be centered at about, oh, I don't know, 6 hours if we can. Doesn't have to be exactly 6 hours, but it would be incredibly helpful. And it's going to start rotating a bit. Which is not as big of a problem as it might seem, but that is somewhat annoying. It does mean that we won't be centered right under the poles. Anyway, once we burn off some fuel, this should go a little bit faster. But let's think about some of the other features we have here on this, if we have any. I mean, we really don't. I guess aside from the procedural tanks, the fact that it's got this cool green body to it, that I think is actually really awesome. But that's me, you know. I think that it's kinda nifty to have that green body going. So we are about to spend all of the fuel that we need to spend. Chances are we will not hit our target precisely. It's actually not too bad. What we do want to do, however, is we do want to target the moon and take care of our inclination, because it would really help a tremendous amount if we were able to adjust that. Unfortunately, the descending node is close by. And we will about be where we want to be. So we'll schedule to execute at that node. Although actually this one looks like it's going to be better, to tell you the truth. I guess I should have really been paying attention to what I was doing. But that's okay. And it's only going to take some 25 meters per second of delta V to do that. So we will get to that burn point. And we will raise the sky up enough to where the period is going to be in the regime of 6 hours, but also to where the periapsis is really low so that we go through the low point really quickly. There are advantages to this too, because as a result, Kerbin cannot block us. Let's see. Let me just get this guy pointing radial again. Get ourselves a little bit closer to 90. Just in case something goes wrong. If we follow this guy up, then we should hit one of these communication satellites. Specifically, one of the geosync satellites, the one we set up there. Maybe not there. It seems like we're still in range. Who are we connected through? And are we connected at all to anybody? That's Kami Mark 2-1. There we go. Now I want to raise this to a height of about 300 or so. And that's actually probably better without the maneuver node. If we can get up here. Come on, point orbit prograde, so we can hit that. If we can raise that apsis to high enough, I'm thinking about 300, that won't collide with any of the satellites as far as I'm aware. Then on our next pass, we can go through and we can raise the, maybe 350 would even be better. There we go. But yeah, then we can go through and we can raise, ooh, not quite what I had in mind. I guess we're going to be in orbit for a little while because I wasn't paying attention. There we go. That should work a bit better. So let's go back down here. I'm going to get this thing to go prograde again. And this time I will not skip past it. Now we'll have it point grade. But this will have us taken care of in terms of communications for a while. Once we get this guy tweaked. And really, tweaking it isn't going to be hard. I just have to add on an extra 35 minutes or so of burn time. So there we go. Final apsis should be pretty high. Let's just get this guy down to that 6-hour mark. It doesn't have to be perfect, not like the geosync sats anyway. There's a little bit of tolerance here. And let me just turn down those engines just a hair so we can make finer adjustments. Maybe to 25 or something. There we go. I'll call that good enough. We will probably drift a little bit, but that'll be fine for now. Let's return to the Space Center and launch another mission that I've been putting off. One that I think should be fairly easy for us to do, but we just hadn't gotten around to doing it. We have to test our ion engine. And so I'm going to take this time and show you the small version of the 2nd generation SSTO that I made for this purpose. And all we really have to do for that is to go here, grab that ion engine wherever it is, and slap on this guy, who may have, it looks like he has enough thrust, so maybe that's not so bad. However, it does appear as though the fuel lines are broken, which is not going to be good for us. Now, this is one of the rare instances where I can take this thing up and then have it all come back down all in one go. I think I'm going to use the egg-shaped fairing for this. I think it's slightly more aerodynamic. But, usually, this sort of thing is quite difficult to pull off, unless, like, you're talking about, like, a space plane. In this case, it's not so bad. Really all we want to do is we want to go through and get the sky into a shallow orbit. That can be done quite easily. Let's bring up the vessel stats. We got plenty of delta V with which to do it, and this craft is almost stable. In fact, I'd say it's about as stable as it's going to get. So let's launch. And this is more or less the same idea as last time, the last version of this anyhow. Except everything has been integrated in. We want to make sure that we don't take too shallow of a profile here, because the only drawback to something like this is that it will rip itself apart at a moment's notice. And that could be bad. Nonetheless, we are in a pretty good way here. And I think we will hit this just fine. Even if we are a little bit shallow, maybe I can rectify that somewhat. Though again, it doesn't matter nearly as much, because we have plenty of fuel in order to make this happen. I just don't want FAR to offer my vessel to the physics gods as a sacrifice. So there we go. We're making very good progress here. And we're looking specifically to be between 75 and 83 kilometers. That would be best. That's probably asking for a lot. But I think we can make it. We'll just wait for our apsis to decay a little bit. We've still got quite a time until we hit that apsis. And it looks like we're more or less golden here, so I'm going to extend that out. Get ourselves into an orbit. That's between 79 and 100. That is not quite what I wanted. I think that could stand to move a little bit. That is more like it seems. So when we achieve orbit, we'll be in a very good position to collect this data. And it will be important because it will essentially mean that with this and one other experiment I'm going to do, another one that I've put off, it'll mean that we can afford a 550 if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong about that. But we'll give this thing the opportunity to do a good job. And there we go. That is about where we want to be. We'll do that experiment. That gave us 186. Well, more than that, but that did give us 167 plus 55, which means that it should be worth a bit more. It's kind of curious that I didn't get more from that. But that'll be okay, I think. We'll just bring this down to here. We're being careful not to really trust this thing, because it does have the unfortunate side effect of undershooting. It does give us a good idea of where we might land, though. It supposedly also works with bodies that don't have any air on them as well. But I'm not exactly sure how accurate that is. I guess we'll just have to find out. Anyway, we're almost poised for this burn. We are still not really pointing towards the node, which would be kinda nice. Remote tech sometimes it gets this aspect wrong. But there's not really much we can do about that. Nonetheless, we are about where we predicted we would be. We will do surface grade minus here. And we will prepare for re-entry. That's in fact one of the nicer things about this Trajectories mod. It'll tell you where you begin to re-enter via that red line. I'm going to go ahead and bring the gear out, as we might as well have it out. And we will begin moving on down. And that will be something that will happen fairly shortly. If we really need to, we can make re-entry happen quite easily. And because the Earth is rotating, it will bring us pretty close in. Though perhaps not as close as we want to be. So let's see if maybe we can't get that going. We are very slowly losing our altitude here, and I reckon that we will continue to do so. Fairly soon. I believe we're going over the desert now. Are we really untitled spacecraft? There's the desert. We are going to land somewhat short of the KSC, unfortunately. Though close enough to where it's not really that big of a deal. I'm actually going to make a point to land on the coast if I can. Even though I cannot really see where it is that I'm going. But if we can make it over land in time, and I believe that will be possible. And then we have a fairly good deal going on to where it is going to be possible for us to get this guy out to exactly where we need it. Okay, that looks to be about right. Land is difficult to tell if we'll hit it or not. I don't think we will. So I'm going to use some of my Delta V here to bring us down, because we are probably going to land in the water. And in that case, you know, we might as well get ourselves going as slowly as possible. We will touch down fairly lightly with this guy. There's parachute deployment. And there is my vessel rotating like nobody else's business, because I happen to have the flight computer on. We'll get this guy on down here and be prepared to recover as soon as we can. And there we go. This vessel has been recovered, and we can now send out the next mission. Although we probably should check contracts here, because contracts can yield a lot of science. Maybe we can get one here. We could rescue Theoden. LV-909 splashdown. That's only 8. Not worth it, in my opinion. Poodle in orbit. Could be worth it. And we do get money for it, which we want. But I think we will wait until another time, because I don't have anything like that prepared. And we will launch the CCP-7A, which is named so because I actually went through and did a completely different version of this before I did Procedural Parts. And that worked out okay. But, you know, it could have been a lot better in some sense. And with Procedural Parts, it was. So we're sort of at our limit here. We will go ahead and wait to get into orbit here. And I think we're actually good here, because we don't want to directly launch to the moon. We just need to be careful. Because Delta V is somewhat limited on this thing. Now, I've found a potential use case for another piece of hardware I'm going to launch in, maybe in this episode. It depends. That may be useful here. I've really chosen not to launch it for the very fact that this is more important to me in some sense. This is that decoupler mission that is really quite irksome. And instead of risking Kerbals to do this, what I decided to do instead was to send a probe. Because we do have to start landing landers. And that'll be important. Let's pop that fairing. We're completely independent of any solar panels on this thing. We've got ourselves that one RTG. And we're a bit high, aren't we? In fact, we're way too high. It looks like we'll have to do an inclination adjustment burn here. As we're about out of fuel on this guy. Not such a glorious launch for me. Better than it could have been, though. It's going to be 110 using 209 out of 247. Can we get closer to circularization like that? Or can I, by paying enough attention to this, can I lower my apoapsis? The answer to that is going to be no. I cannot. So it's not entirely circular. I want to leave about 25 meters per second or so, if we can. That's 135 by 130. That is not very promising. I'm going to reduce this down to 220 meters per second, because that will give us a little bit of wiggle room here. Well, let's commit that burn. And then we will have to do an inclination change. As much as that prospect bothers me just a little bit. And I do want to get an idea of just how much delta V I do have left in that stage. 44 meters per second. That's not a lot, but I think we can work with that. So the first thing we got to do is we have to target our moon. We'll set this as the target here. We're not going to bother changing our node, or descending node rather, quite yet. If we really need to do that, we can do it in orbit. I think we have gone out a little bit too far. Let's see. It's 819, 102. Let's get that fairly low. 18 should be good. And I think that is, it's hard to tell if that's going around the right way. That is, in fact, I think that was. So yeah, that's only 12 minutes from now. We better get ready and head on out to the moon. Other things we should do include turning on the sky here, or else we will not be able to communicate. And this thing will be dead in the water. I just had that thing selected. There we go. Now we have communications. And we'll have communications for as long as we need it. Now there's going to be a question when we come in of whether or not we can make this adjustment so that we can land in the east crater, which is more or less the only place where I think we've gotten the gravioli or the seismic scan in one of the other craters. We could potentially go there too if it's more fortuitous. But we do nonetheless want... Well, maybe I should activate my engine. That would actually be quite important. Now, this guy by itself does have plenty of Delta V. I put this second transfer stage on it because I always seem to run out. And I do want a little bit of wiggle room here. Because it's easy enough to get this thing, you know, onto the moon. That's not the hard part. Having enough fuel to get back after landing is a completely different matter. And it's something we have to think about, because there is a lot of hardware on this thing. I mean, the science equipment alone is really expensive and makes up for most of the cost of it, so we do want to be able to recover this in such a way where we do get it back. That, I think the RTG is expensive as well, and parachutes are a good thing to have. I probably should set those, however, to where they are at a reasonable pressure, because they can still burn up in the atmosphere. Not nearly as badly as, say, I don't know, like, with the bigger craft, and not nearly as badly as they used to because I tweaked that value. But I do want to make sure that whatever it is I do, and it does seem like, oh, I see what happened. We missed that node because I did not turn on my engine in time. Well, this is going to be interesting. Now the question is going to be if we can get out there at all. Because we would have quite a bit of space debris to deal with. Space debris that can be dealt with, but still not my favorite thing to... my favorite idea to entertain. Space debris can get rather nasty. And tweaking this is going to suck too, because we're inclined relative to the moon by almost a full degree. That means our options for landing are quite limited. But it does look like we are going to miss, because we burned about a minute later than we needed to. Let's see if maybe we can't do something to correct that. Let's see, that is... I believe there we are coming in front. Oh no, we're actually coming behind the moon. Surprisingly. Looks like we got another encounter of some kind. That's Kerbin escape. Not so much an encounter as an escape trajectory. Let's see, can we... Looks like we got a free return trajectory here. Let's point grade. Still plenty of delta V in this stage, so that it can be used to assist in landing. Although I think we actually want to go the opposite way. I believe we may actually wish to take this and do some adjustment with it. See, one moment. And we are back. So I had to wait for some things to happen. I decided to go ahead and get us into orbit and make some adjustments, just in case, you know, that would turn out being tedious. It actually did. But what I've decided to do here now is begin our approach. We're going to land in this east crater. So, I've already got ourselves a maneuver node sketched out that should help us with that. The other thing we want to happen is for the satellite to be nearby. When this happens, we want to be pointing to our node, of course. So with any amount of luck, we will be in the right place. Otherwise, this is toast. And you can see we still have about 300 meters per second of delta V left in our transfer stage, so we're going to use that to land with. And the idea is for the satellite to practically be overhead whenever we are about to land. As it will, you can see it's moving right into position. So, we will get this going so that it can make its burn. And we will see just how close we get to it. And at this point, we want our biome available as well. I'm going to turn on the surface here. And when we get close, as we have now, I will start pointing retrograde as well, and pop out our landing gear. Now we do have engines on this, so that we can bring this back, and in fact that is what we're planning on doing. But it now just comes to the point of determining how close we are going to be to that crater. I also wanted to land on the day side, as that will be very helpful for us as well. And it may help for us to throttle down just a little bit, because we are getting close. So that'll happen right now. And as soon as we hit that crater, right now in fact, we'll begin burning. I'm even going to take it off of the orbit here and just push this up some, get rid of as much of our lateral velocity as we can, as we should be landing in that crater like this. And this part will take a little bit of time, undoubtedly, but not nearly as much as you might think. We're about to jettison that stage and use the more sprightly RCS engines. That will get us a fair deal down this thing. I'm going to turn off flight computer now. You can see we are not far away from that flag. And we will allow us some time to land here as well. Plenty of Delta V for us to take back with us, or at least get off of the surface with. And there we go. We are more or less ready to begin landing. I'm going to get down to about 2K before I do another burn. Although 2K does seem to be excessive here. Let's get this guy down to, oh, I don't know, about 30 or so. And we have burned a little bit too much here. But we can never be too safe with this thing, because this does have quite a bit of science on it. So let's try to maintain about 30 meters per second or so. And then cut that throttle up whenever we get close in. Probably would be time for us to begin kicking up the throttle a little bit. And we will just hover over the surface. I think it's time for us to throttle up just a little bit. And oh, well, I'm surprised nothing broke off, to tell you the truth. So much for getting this thing back. We may not be able to. But let's collect this science here. And let's see if maybe there is a way for me to correct this. Certainly, I can at least send this science here. Getting it back may be a bit of an issue for us. As, we are sort of running out of power here. And that is no good. Maybe this can act as a relay if we can't get it back. If we can just get this thing to nose up. That would be excellent. But there may not be enough reaction wheel power there, so it'll just really depend. This whole trip of flipping us over may in fact not work all that well for us. In which case, we are in some amount of trouble. Oh, almost, almost. Do we got it? We do. Well, there we go. I think we might as well. Oh, I'm gonna grab more science. And then we will do the trip home. Let me bring up our vessel information. We still got tons of Delta V. Can we make it over this mountain? Maybe. Maybe we can make it over this mountain. Let's just coast to our apoapsis real quick. Get ourselves into some kind of orbit. It's 35 by 79. 66 by 47. Can we do better? .42 by 52. Well, that is going to have to do. But I think we should be okay now. If we look at the science that I've gathered here, we have 519. I believe once we recover the science from the surface, or what remains of it, we will have enough for one more part in the tech tree. And that will be something for us to take care of. And then we can begin thinking about returning to Kerbin. Now, that shouldn't be too hard for us to do, really. But let's just get this guy onto a proper escape trajectory, and let's see which is closest. And this does appear to be the case, that this guy is closest to us. We bring this in a bit more, I think we will be fairly close in. Just need to rotate it a little bit more. Maybe increase our velocity some. .23 I think is going to be too steep. 36 though will be good. So let's hit that node and let's schedule its execution. And let's just wait for this thing to land. Oh, it slowed us down just a little bit because we're under 50,000 meters. And that'll help us out in the long run. Could still, well, we have no connection with which to lower this. So we'll have to wait until we get close to the planet, probably. Although we do have a connection, so maybe if I hit grade, that will do it for us. Okay, I need to go prograde, not retrograde. Now, I'm not sure if we'll land anywhere near KSC. My guess is it's very unlikely, but we'll have to see. There we go. That is more than good enough. I'm going to go ahead and deploy the parachutes out from here. And then we will move on out. And you can see we are now getting fairly close. So, let's see where we're at right now. We're fairly close by, it looks like. I'm not even going to bother retracting the landing legs here. And it looks like we may actually end up near the KSC after all. Well, really only one way for us to find out. And that is for us to go ahead and try this. We should be perfectly okay, though. As for Delta V, we seem to have used it all. So we might be able to use this for braking of some kind. Though the chances of that are not good. We'll do our surface here. We should be, let's see, we'll do surface grade. No, don't turn. I thought I had surface grade on. I don't know why it turned it off. But anyway, that should not take us too long. You can see we're crossing the desert. And there appears to be drag of some kind here. As long as we can keep this guy from flipping out. It looks like I forgot to retract the antenna on the way in. But that'll be okay. It looks like we will be landing down here in the desert, which is good enough for me. I think the desert's a fine place for us to land. And there go our parachutes. So there we go. We should land just fine. In fact, this is a rather sedate landing, isn't it, to begin with? The landing that almost did not happen. But there we go. We're going to recover that. See what we got out of it in total. And in this case we have 618. So before I leave, I just want to figure out what contracts we might pick up. There is, of course, rescue a Kerbin, test a stack decoupler, land at the moon. Do I really want to do that? It's only 92 science. Test this and flight over Kerbin for nothing. Although, that is 103 science. So it may be worth it. I'll have to think on that. And it wants us to test an LV-1 liquid fuel engine orbiting Kerbin, which we can do as well. That's worth 118. So I will take that as our next deal. Now let's go to our science and see if there's anything in particular we might want. Well, a couple of things we have here. We have the electromagnet. That's too high though. Do we want this guy? Might not be such a bad guy to have actually, because we can use this as part of an SSTO maybe. That would be interesting. We can get that now. Or we can get ion engines and the procedural xenon tank. Or we can get better rover wheels. I think I will go with the better rover wheels for now. But this has been Thy Lord Root, and I will see you next time.